We've got Brim Bason, a good old friend of mine. Hey, Brim, how are
Hey,
you?
good morning, Taylor. How are you today?
Good to see you. Good morning. Oh, I like your painting in the background. That's nice in your rules of life.
Repurposing a TV as a slash monitor slash
Oh,
background
it's a
drop.
TV.
Yeah,
Oh, it's nice.
It looks
yeah,
great. It looks great. We're going to be having, fireside chat. We want to keep this real conversation going. Again, for anyone who's just dialed in, we're recording everything. We're going to slice everything up and put it up on the web. So if you can't stick throughout the day, we totally get it. Stick to the live conversation as much as you want and pop in and out. And this next conversation is with Brim Bason. You are the Chief Information Officer at MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And I'd like you and Jen to kind of sit back and have a conversation. Both of you are into the weeds very often on buying new technology for an organization. And I thought this would be a good conversation to start this event with, because one of the biggest things on people's minds right now is, all right, now maybe I need to buy this new technology. How do I get people to adopt it? How do I adopt it? How do I drive that change within my organization? And so that's what I'm hoping to sit down and chat with you guys today. So, Jen, you are leading this conversation. I'm going to not talk all day long. This is why I brought in all of these other amazing MCs with me so that I have time to take a break and drink some water and some coffee. So Jen, Brim, take it away. Thank you, Brim, for being here.
Oh, yeah. No, thank you, Taylor, for having me. I'm very appreciative, and hi, everybody out there that's online today.
Yeah. So it looks like we got about 140 people dialed in, so that's great. So, Brim, let's take it away. You're the CIO of MAD. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, maybe your background, how you got
Yeah,
there?
sure. I'm embracing the new Zoom life. Seems like I'm on Zoom 8 hours a day with my kids and with the work. So, that's good. Yeah. So, currently I'm working for MAD, Mother Against Drunk Driving. Been in the nonprofit space for about 10 years. Prior to that, I worked for some of the largest healthcare banking companies. Worked for Walmart's home office for a while, 3,000 people in IT. And also work for startups. So, I've been able to kind of see like the economy of, very infant organizations to very mature organizations when it comes to change management, technology, people and processes as well. So it gives me at least some ground level to kind of have expectations of what I kind of expect going into an organization,
Right.
And got into the nonprofit industry about 10 years ago, worked for Susan G. Komen and then MAD, and kind of got the nonprofit bug and stuck ever since.
Right. It's kind of addictive. You kind of get into the nonprofit space and you're like, oh, this is actually nicer than working for whatever, maybe Walmart or whatever. You're like a more mission based. So that's great. So as a CIO, I'm sure you're pivotal in helping your organization think about the landscape out there and thinking about new technologies. What do you do when you're kind of evaluating, or some of those steps you take to help think about a new technology or a new tool or something that you want to maybe bring in and start incorporating into the organization? Do you have a checklist? How do you think about it?
Yeah. No, thank you, Jen. Yeah. So I think, really identifying the challenges with the current solution, right? Like what are the features you're trying to replace? What are you trying to improve upon? One of the biggest things, that I see people fail time and time again is not actually building a business case for the new solution.
Okay.
So that's something that I really focus on, is building out a business case very early on in the process, start formulating that. So you can look at, what are my hard and cost savings going to be? Because a lot of times it's easy to say, okay, this new technology is going to cost X number of dollars. Okay, maybe it's costs less, maybe it costs more. But if you're not including the soft costs in there as well, and not packaging that, it can be a real problem.
Yeah. Do you have sort of lists or things like that you could maybe share with folks about how to sort of think about something? Because I think those are some of those hidden costs that people just forget about sometimes when they think about it. They think about the technology or the technology cost, but certainly there's all those other things to think about. I think there's some resources out there. We'll start to collect and pile some resources together for people, but that's a good one. Those are hidden.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with the business case, looking at, like I said, soft costs, like, is it going to reduce number of clicks? Is it going to streamline operations? Is it going to be less support tickets for IT or whatever the staff might be? And really packaging that. And I've seen that work really well when it comes to just getting your message out there and being able to really show how that's going to benefit the organization.
Yeah. I see a good question that just popped up, which is maybe we can pivot just a second in our pivot day.
Yeah.
Thinking about that, and you're thinking about, let's think about all these costs, and you're thinking about the evaluation of different technologies. How the question is, what do you advise people who want new technology but are facing budget cuts in this crisis? Is there anything off the back of the envelope there that you're like, here's how I would think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when the budget cuts, you have to be really careful that we know what you're cutting, especially short term, right? A lot of people like to react, and you end up hurting yourself long term. So I think if you can understand what that real impact is, not just that hard expense cost, but maybe you're going to cut that hard cost. Now you're going to add 10x more bandwidth to somebody, doing manual processing, whatever it might be.
Right.
So, I mean, those are tough decisions, but try to look at it from, both angles and really look at the total impact.
Yeah, I think there is definitely thinking about we'll talk about later too, like thinking about what you evaluate when you need a new technology, thinking about is it actually the technology that is needed and a change in the technology, or can you use some of the tools that you currently have better, more effectively, more efficiently than you thought you might have been. So when you're thinking about bringing on maybe a new tool, how do you help drive adoption of a new platform within an organization? That's a big.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, a couple things. I mean, education and communication, that's some easier said than done sometimes, right? But you also have to be willing as an organization, this is kind of an organizational mindset, but to fail and fail fast, right? Everything doesn't have to be perfect out of the gate. If you're trying to get to perfect before you push something out there, a lot of times you're going to be spending so much more time before you can actually get any benefit from it, right? So get the impactful changes out there and try to be agile and iterative as you move forward and say, okay, we get 80% of the functionality, we can get this impact, and then kind of work through that. Yeah. Because one of the things I always say is, you can kill a lot of great ideas by collaboration overload. It's, you get into too many conversations, get too much buy-in, and then it just dies.
Never goes anywhere. Yeah. I think it's a little bit of a sweet spot in there between, I've had a lot of time working with organizations that just one team kind of goes rogue though, and is like, okay, we're going to do this thing. And then they just kind of go kind of in their own little bubble and, buy a new platform or whatever enough over here. And then you're kind of like there's not widespread adoption. And so that can also be challenging. So there is a sweet spot between over collaborating. You're like talk yourself to death before the thing ever even gets going. And again, I like back to Taylor's, don't let perfect get in the way of launch or getting something out the door and knowing that it's going to be iterated. But also the flip side or the other extreme of that is don't try in your organization not to go too rogue and have a little spin-off team that picks a new platform and goes crazy without getting a little bit more of that buy-in. I think the buy-in is helpful to get sort of a wider spread adoption. So kind of as people are evaluating that and thinking about that, where you have some high level pros and cons of bringing on a new platform, and even now in this space, what are some things people should just?
Yeah, sure. And I think too, just one other note kind of on the adoption piece, I think it's really important to have a strategic roadmap in mind or a vision, you can easily communicate to people, because a lot of times people love visuals, right? So if you can use a product roadmap tool, something like that, to map out, hey, 12 months, 24 months, looking big picture with that, and just get it in a visual so that people can easily consume that information. That's really beneficial too, as you're trying to adopt and push things out to the organization.
I think also just as you're mapping that out, I think it's important to sort of look at the related impacts, I guess, sort of those, you're okay, this is a big benefit. Again, like you'd said earlier, what's this going to push against? And so where are the other transactional points? We're okay, when we adopt this new piece of software, maybe how will that impact in a positive or negative way, different teams across an organization? So we're talking about bringing on new tools. Since you're the CIO, good question that just popped up in the chat is who generally has oversight in an organization about maybe the actually having the ability to say, yes, we're going to bring on a new tool? Is it usually IT teams that you're seeing, or is it a combination, or do you feel like it should live in a particular team to sort of drive?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, that's something that as you look at an organization, you have to have people in leadership positions that you trust to make decisions as well. If you are in an organization where you're being micromanaged and you have a committee for everything, it's going to be tough to get change out there, right? You have to have people and leadership in place, say, trust to make decisions and empower those people to kind of going forward. So that can be, I mean, adopting technology can be an organizational change too, because people will say they want that, they want that change or whatever it might be, but they don't have the structure in place organizationally because maybe they have a COO, or maybe they have somebody that wants to literally be involved in every single decision. So that can really stymie the growth going forward or adopting new technology. So from a tech side, from my side, I mean, if it's a technology piece, that usually comes from myself, my team, and then, it's something that is talked about with senior leadership team, and then, CEO kind of approval and move forward. I've seen that, in different structures. You need to have some consistency and some governorship over bringing the new tech, right? You don't want a bunch of shadow platforms being stood up. So you have to have consistency there as well as you move things forward.
Yeah, I think what you just said is really important, that at least some, a team in the organization needs to make sure that they're sort of the gatekeepers, because that's how you can kind of say, great, I can help evaluate any new tools that might come in against the larger stack, essentially, or like the larger kind of landscape of technology and tools that are being run at the organization. Again, why it's really important not to just have one team sort of kind of do their own thing and not check in at least and say, hey, we're going to run this by, through at least a couple of chains. And I think establishing that inside the organization is really critical to say, make sure everybody knows that there's at least a process. Again, it doesn't have to be death by committee, but say, hey, if you're thinking that you need a new piece of technology or a new tool to help streamline, make some process in your division or your department more effective, more efficient, more modern, at least kind of have a way of saying, here's the the process and the team that needs to at least be involved minimally, and kind of check it against the larger kind of umbrella of what's going on at the organization. So you don't have those sort of weird, inconsistent one-off platforms that can be really critical. Like create these silos of data over here and over here. I can't tell you the number of times I've gone into an organization and they say, oh, well, our advocacy department uses X and our development department uses Y, and and like none of it talks to each other. That is so common. And so I think one of the more critical things about adopting into a new piece of technology is to try and come back, and I'll talk about this later in my session too, about making sure that you're really assessing the needs across an organization when possible. I get it. I know I worked for a big national organization. Sometimes this is really impossible, but do the best you can, at least, again, like saying, kind of bring it back through a central body that has at least some insight and oversight into kind of the different platforms that are being used across an organization, to make sure that it's sort of, at least it's known and there's a process. So it is, and cataloged. Again, also people like, I don't know what tools are being used and I don't know how to access them and things like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a really good point, Jen, too. I mean, because prior to me coming in, there was very siloed, different technology pieces, different pieces. So now I own the enterprise architecture, right? So it's also understanding what you can do, right? Like what technology I have, what I can do versus what I want to do sometimes too. So you do have to have that for sure to be able to make sure that, nowadays it's a lot of cloud platforms, a lot of integrations. You have to understand the impacts of bringing in something that new as well. And that just comes from knowledge and having some oversight on that too. Yeah,
I think the most effective sort of adoption of new technology that I've seen actually forces an organization to get their internal, butts in order, because you're kind of like, oh, when you actually come in as an outsider and start forcing people into a conference room together, then they're like, oh my God, I didn't know you were using that. And oh, I didn't know, blah, blah, blah. And then they have to go, oh, hey, guess what? We're going to be way more effective. Just like hands down, full stop. You're going to be way more effective if your platforms across your different departments are talking to each other, are taking each other into consideration. And it'll just be so much more efficient to say, oh, if I need to bring on another platform, like say you're a total Salesforce organization, fine. Making sure everything is a really steady and good integration in Salesforce, but that requires, again, some amount of sort of like, how are we going to bring this in? How's it going to get integrated? How are we going to use the logic of the data that now comes in from this new channel coming in to piping into our main CRM? Like we have to think about all these different things, and then how does it integrate with our back office and all these other things. So it's really important to do at least a little bit of like pre-thinking, pre-checklisting and assessment, and then really getting that landscape plotted out to begin with before you're even thinking about bringing something new on. It'd be funny too. I've seen that situation too where people go, I don't even know we had that here already. I guess
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
go do that. Like,
I mean, one of the first things I did was put together a massive enterprise kind of diagram, and people never seen it before, right?
right.
Seen parts of it. They never seen like, oh, we actually have 40 applications we work with, so yeah, you have to definitely communicate that and, and get that out and make people aware. And it's a continual process, right? It's like re-education over and over. You got to keep hammering the same points because people forget quickly. You bring something up. You don't remember the roadmap we talked about a month ago? No. Okay. So
whatever, it takes people, whatever, 7 times at least to see something before they actually kind of start to remember it. And then obviously, as we know, there's different, there's turnover, things happen, and there's new people on the table, but just even have that map, there's like right now, I'd say in most organizations doesn't even exist. So that's a good even starting point, is to go through and do some mapping of your existing ecosystem of like, do we actually have, you don't have to pay a consultant to do that. Just go do it yourself, like figure out what you've got. And then you can actually assess a little bit better about bringing a new piece into that environment, because you kind of know what is existing already. Because otherwise it's sort of like, I don't know, because a lot of times you get a knee jerk. I just need something different. There's this cool new platform. We need to use it. Wait, what? So that might be that's a good, like when you see or you hear, I'm not going to, pick on anybody. I'm just going to say usually it's maybe like a C-level person, maybe that's like, I've heard of this cool new thing. We have to use it. Yeah. And then they come to you, how do you push back when it's not the right fit, but let's say the CEO wants it. They've seen something cool about it. How do you handle that?
Yeah, sure. And I think too, when you've got all these existing platforms, you also have to make sure that you're actually using them correctly. Because a lot of times I've seen organizations that have a platform, they say, oh, it's not working. They're not engaged with the vendor properly. They're not using the platform the way it's meant to be, right? So you also have to assess and be realistic and take the time to say, are we maximizing what we currently have too? Right. That's a big thing that I've seen that can be a problem. I think, anything, especially with change, I think really people can be the most difficult part of it, right?
Often.
That is, to me, the biggest pain point is, they focus on what they have to give up versus what they're going to have to gain. And they're typically looking at maybe one quarter at a time, not looking at the big picture. So that's something that, if you're getting pushback, as you're moving forward, you got to keep reminding everyone that change is a process and it's not a one-time event. Like this is a daily thing. This is not just something all of a sudden, hey, new technology, great. Well, you're going to have to
solve all my problems. It's a miracle. It's amazing.
Yeah. That's one of those things. Also introducing the technology. So typically, if it's like a core leadership team, walking through that, kind of looking at how's this going to benefit everyone, but really thinking long-term with it too. We just got to look 12 months, 18 months. We can't just look at that one small window of say like 90 days, because for 90 days, it might be more difficult, right? Like if I'm trying to sunset an application, I've got a brand new one. Well, the first 90 days might become more of a pain because somebody might have 2 places to do something.
Right.
But having the long-term vision and kind of sticking to that path and just re-educating them. Also, with the training and things like that you can do for your employees as well.
The training piece of it, I can't understate. And I can't understate the ramp up, and that you just said, like the planning and really being realistic about what kind of timeline it's going to take to actually adopt a new piece of technology into your organization. I have so many that are like, well, I have to be up and running by X date. And so they think, oh, I just need to go live, like a week before. And I'm like, no, actually, you need to give yourself plenty of time for training. And actually, even though it's a pain, having a little bit of that overlap between the 2 systems, because if you just kind of go, it's a freeze and go live and the old system goes dark and you're like, I don't know how to actually do the things that I need to do every single day on that new platform. Then you kind of panic. So I think planning and being realistic about sort of that adoption time, I think is key. And sort of being just real with people about what it's going to take to get from one place to the other, and be, again, back to kindness and grace, like know that it's going to be harder. Even when you plan it out, it's going to be harder and probably take a little longer than even when you think it will. Because
Well, and also re-educate people too, after you do the initial trainings, but, down the road too, is you're trying to drive adoption and, just having additional trainings or whatever it might be to kind of keep people re-educated.
Yeah.
Especially as you see questions come up, all right, I don't know how to use this piece of it. As questions come in, you can address those and continue to push the envelope forward.
So our last question as we're wrapping up and getting ready for a little mid-morning break, if people have, like, you've got advice, you've got a little audience here, if an organization hasn't been that strong in their digital, do you have one kind of high level top recommendation for folks to make a pivot? Like, what would that be for folks if you had one?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of got a couple of things. So I think, I think you have to be, we're talking about technology, but technology cannot solve all your problems, right? You have to have the right team and foundation in place to be able to, maximize any changes. So, I've heard in my career many times, if we just had this software solution, if we just had this piece of technology, I remember way back when we built a moves management piece in Salesforce, literally 5 versions of it in 2 years. Not a problem with technology, not a problem with the platform, it's a problem with people and processes. Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes you have to take a really hard look at your organizational structure and make some difficult decisions to possibly change talent if you need to, because if it's like, if I look at it as a pyramid, if your bottom foundation is not strong, you're only going to be able to do so much at the top of the pyramid when it comes to technology and strategic changes across the organization. So I think you have to really hard look at that piece of it as you're also looking to adopt the technology piece going forward, and also understand your current limitations when it comes to your current data architecture and system limitations. One step at a time. You can't bite off more than you can chew, right? You've got to take one step at a time and look for daily improvements. So you can really get there long term. You're not just going to get there overnight. It's going to take time. It took 12 months to get your data in gear, but you can work on other things.
Right. And we'll talk about that in my session later today as well. Like, be realistic about how long it's going to take to actually get from here to there. And that's a big one. I think that's probably the biggest piece of advice I think a lot of people want to adopt, although there are some opportunities to some nimble adjustments right now in the space, but also like making a change systematically and systemically inside your organization. It's a bit of a change, and it's going to take a while in planning. And again, thinking about the right people in the right places, I think, is key. I like the pyramid analogy a lot. A CEO can't make all the changes themselves and move. You need your whole team to be on board with what you're trying to do. So thank you so much, Brim. Really appreciate your insights and the conversation. And hopefully you'll be able to stick around a little bit later as other people. There's some other questions that have shown up in the chat, so we'll get those answered the best we can after the fact. Mm-hmm. We'll be doing some Q&A, so we'll send some questions back through with each speaker. We'll be posting out some Q&A back when we post the sessions out onto the site in the next week or so. But look for those. And Brim, love it. Thank you for your insights.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just ask everybody to take care of themselves during these strange times, and it's great to see all of you online today. So have a great day.